Well, Rob Moore, it's my great pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, I've got to just confess, you've been in my ears for probably the last 2 to 3 years, as have you been in my wife's ears as well. And your name has cropped up in ears.
Yeah.
Your name has cropped up in conversation over dinner numerous times, so it's almost like you're part of the household in that way. In that respect, I must thank you for that as well. It's been an influence. You've influenced how me starting this podcast as well. So in the intro, I talked about your successes. I talk about the accolades, and all the great things you're doing. But I always ask the same question at the beginning of a show, and that is, how do you do what you love and love what you do?
How do you do what you love and love what you do? I would say that the first thing is you've got to define what you love. And I think a lot of people aren't really clear on where they want to go. When I was between the age of sort of 17 and 25, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't really have any deep loves. I sort of flirted with a lot of things and went wide and not very deep on a lot of things. And so I'd fall in and out of love with passions, professions and people very quickly. And so there seems to be a sort of a common theme across all areas of life is, first off, defining what it is we love. The second thing then is understanding that you can monetize and merge your passion and profession doing what you love if you really want to. And, even let's just take something like pool. It's a random example, but I quite like playing pool. Now, some people might say, well, you're not going to make a living out of pool. But actually, if you become the best, you'll make a bit of money and you'll get travel paid. But then you could set up a blog, a YouTube channel. I see a lot of people, they play matches for a lot of money and they actually record them live and they stream them out onto YouTube. You could coach individuals. You could write books. You could do podcasts. You could be on Alexa. There really is no limit now to getting your passion profession merge out there. So I suppose the second thing is, once you've defined what you love, trying to find a way to be able to do it like it isn't work and monetize it in some way. Now, you either monetize it by going all into it, by choosing that you're going to do a business and you're going to commercialize it so you can fund it. Or you find another profession, a job or building a property portfolio or doing e-commerce or something like that, which you also enjoy, but, that's not your lifelong passion. And you do that to then fund this passion. But I really believe that life is too short not to do what you love. And I think there's a lot of people exchanging their time for money in the hope that in 20, 30, 40 years or when they retire, they can then do what they love. So they're delaying and sacrificing doing what they love for many decades, only to find that when the time comes to hopefully retire to do what they love, they haven't got enough money or time left in their life to do what they love. So, doing what you love and loving what you do, it is a conscious choice to do that now. And a lot of people, they don't make that choice.
No. It'd be a travesty to look back at the age of 80 and go, damn it, I didn't do what I loved.
Yeah, well, with retirement as well at the moment, the retirement age is getting older and older and older and older. It was 50s, then it's 60s, now it's 70s. Okay, we're living longer. But a lot of people do actually pass away when they lose passion and meaning in their life. So they can often retire and then not live for very long afterwards if they've got nothing meaningful to do. And having meaningful purpose in your life is often things that keep people going the longest. Like, look at Warren Buffett. He's 88 and it's like he's 50 or 40. He's got that vitality and energy and enthusiasm because he does something he loves to do. And that seems to give us this life energy, this vitality.
To take us back a little bit, you talked about between 17 and 25 there. What was life like before that for you growing up in Peterborough, the United Kingdom?
So life as a kid, well, I sort of moved around a lot. Up until I was 17, and then we settled in Peterborough, which is where I live now, and I love it there. And I've kind of got 3 phases of my life, really. So phase 1 was, I'm not this sob story, this sort of real rags to riches that's quite popular. I don't, you don't have to be a stereotype to be a successful individual or happy. So I actually was raised with good parents. They weren't rich, but they had built a good life for themselves. And towards the end, so my dad had pubs, bars, clubs, hotels. Towards the end, it got really hard for him, but he always provided for me and gave me what I needed. He put me through private school. He bought me my first car. He helped me with the deposit for my first house. So he really supported me, and he sort of raised me to be an entrepreneur just by being an entrepreneur himself. And I just wanted that. My dad is and was then my hero. But then, like I said, from 17 to 25, I lost my way because I left the private school. I went to a sort of a state sixth form college.
Right.
Didn't know what I wanted to do. Didn't have any mentors around me. Didn't have anyone to put their hand on my shoulder and say, hey, like Rob, maybe you should think about what you want to do with your life. I was comfortable, and therefore, because I was comfortable, I didn't have this urgency or desperation to go out there and do something with my life. So I just floated. And then December the 15th, 2005, my dad had a nervous breakdown. It was a public one in his pub full of about 100 customers, where he had his first episode of mental health issues and manic depression. And so then on that day, or around about that time, it was certainly triggered by that event, I realized that I'd spent 7 or 8 years being a victim, making excuses, being lazy, being entitled, living off my parents, not stepping up, not being all I could be, forgetting who I was, forgetting how I'd been raised, a bit flippant, a bit arrogant, a bit lazy. All I did from 17 to 25 was drink and have fun. And, people say that you should have those sort of moments in your life. But actually, I wanted to produce value, do good work, wanted to make a difference in people's lives. I wanted to be successful. I wanted to be noticed, important. Yeah. And I wasn't, and I was letting myself down. And then from 25, 26 onwards, that's when I got into property, set up Progressive Property, and then, retired financially in my, I think 27, 28-ish was the first time I retired financially. Then the recession happened and we had to change our model. And then within a year or two, I retired financially again. Then I became a millionaire between 30 and 31. I remember that because it pissed me off because I wanted to be a millionaire before 30, not after 30. And back then that was important to me, that metric. And I say that because that's a metric. It's not important to me now. Once you've made a few million quid, I like money, but there's other things that are more important to me than that now. And then, of course, now I focus a lot on writing and, producing content for people and growing my businesses.
Did you see it coming with your father? Did you see that there were triggers on the way? Just came by surprise?
No. Well, yeah. I mean, I suppose with hindsight that, you may have been able to pick the signs. But the thing is, my dad was always quite highly strung and quite stressed. Yeah. He's very disruptive, very creative, very strong, very committed. And when he grabbed an idea, he was going to run with it. But, I retrospectively, through talking to my mum, learned about his family upbringing, where his mum died when he was 2, his dad died when he was 18. His dad was quite, a strong, hard northern man. So his older brothers and sisters raised him pretty much. But then they died when my dad was quite young, and he just had a hard life. And he could get quite angry, and he would bottle up emotions, and he would never really express how he felt. I remember when our dog, Bruno, a big Alsatian, died, and I saw my dad sort of cry for the first time, and I realized, and he was holding it, and he didn't want his kids to see it. And I remember in that moment thinking, there's a lot of stuff I don't know about my dad, a lot of his emotions that he protects us from. And I think because of that, he stored it all inwards. And then, every sort of couple of months, he'd have a bit of a flip out, get angry and chuck and smash a couple of things. And I guess that's, looking back, that's probably not healthy. And I kind of had that same thing where, I tend to hold emotions inwards, and then they can manifest outwards by storing and becoming big, and then them needing a release. And so my podcasts and my learning to talk and share my vulnerabilities have helped me hopefully not go down that same road. But no, it was like one day it all happened. When my dad was 50, he looked about 30. And then when he was 55, he looked about 70. It was just, We didn't really see it coming.
I've heard an example before where they'll say, if you compare, say, the way that men store emotion as opposed to the way women store emotion, it's generalizing, but it's almost like a pressure switch. Women can sort of switch it off, switch it on, switch it off, switch it on, and release that pressure, whereas men just wait and then boom, they just release the whole lot at once.
Well, women seem to talk about it a lot more, and it seems to be okay for that. And I think until very recently, it's almost like the man's got to be the strong one, and there's this pride And, you know, thankfully, some people are leading the way. I'm sorry to jump in, Paul, but I think this is important to say. You know, like if emotion isn't expressed, it will be repressed. And if you store it, it will manifest in ways that you can't control, like illness, like taking it out on other people, you know, like your kids and the people you love. And isn't it sad that, you know, often the people that get the brunt of our stored life emotions and rejections and pain are the people closest to us who we love, like our kids and our wives and husbands. And it shouldn't be like that. And so, you know, I feel I'm on a bit of a life mission to express these emotions as both therapy and a gift to others. And so you know, you do a podcast and I'm sure it's the same for you, Paul, but, you know, it's like I get this sort of paradoxical benefit of helping others through the pain that I go through, and therapy to myself by expressing the pain that I go through. And then when I do that, I attract other people who are going through pain, and then I'm able to support them and we're able to connect, and then that's a gift to them. So it's like this virtual cycle. So I'm just living this, and someone's just said, I don't agree that women talk about it more. So we've made a generalization. And I think generally speaking, stereotypically, women do express these emotions more. But it's certainly true to say there's plenty of women that don't and feel like they can't, and, you know, and are probably suppressed and have had abuse, and some cultures where women are not on an equal playing field. So it's probably, you know, we shouldn't just go men, women, no. You know, we should just go, hey, look, you've got to express yourself and talk about this.
Yeah, it's a lot about how you've been brought up, your experiences and so on. So one of your first introductions into entrepreneurship was as an artist. How were you introduced to art?
So I started in art because when I was young, I think one of my ways of expressing my emotions was to draw. And I see it with my son, because my son, he's quite introverted and like he's quite complex to read. And, you know, you could call it shyness. And so what he does is he stores emotion like I used to do and still do to some degree. And what he does is he'll sit down, and he's got like 200 cars, and he will meticulously, almost like to the point where he measures them, park every single one. And if you move them a bit, that upsets him. And it's funny because I used to be like that. And he will write these endless lists. So we collect stickers, him and I, the World Cup stickers, and he will open his book and he'll write the name of every single player, or he'll write the name of every single golfer in the top 100. And I think that's a way of him expressing control. And so for me, I just drew from a really early age. I'd sit in my bedroom and just draw. I'd draw the football teams I liked. I'd draw animals. I'd copy things out of books. And I was always in the top of my classes and at art, just because I think it was a way for me to express myself and my emotions and the things that I stored. Because in my life, I've stored energy and emotion in different ways. So when I was young, it would be, when I was overweight at school, it would be, you know, like both actual emotional bullying, but also what I perceived people were saying about me even when they weren't. And then I'd store that. And I wouldn't talk about that to anyone. I'd just cry to my mum every weekend. Or, you know, and in business now, I store my emotions by not having a go at people who make mistakes every single day when silly mistakes happen. I'll give you an example. Our team sent out a text message to some of our clients, and it was supposed to go to a small specific segment of our community, and it went to everyone. And the bigger the segment of text messages that gets sent out, the longer it takes them to send. So we don't send them out in big segments, because if we send them out at 5 o'clock in the evening and we send them to 350,000 people, some people are getting texts at 4 in the morning because it takes so long to go out. But there was a mistake. And it went out to the whole community, 315,000 people, and people are getting texts at 4 in the morning. You know, and like that text comes from me, but it's not written by me. It's done by my marketing team. But I have to take the brunt of that when people post on social media and you know, and send their vitriolic replies. But, you know, like I have to store those emotions, because that's fair feedback. And, you know, when you're managing people, they make mistakes. And, you know, I think leadership is about encouraging other leaders and developing other leaders, and shooting people down when they make the mistakes is not the way to develop leadership. So, you know, like we're all storing emotions in different ways. Sometimes, you know, like I have quite a few critics. Now, when I say quite a few critics, as a percentage, it's very low. It might be 1 or 0.5% of my followers, but I've got a lot of followers now. So with that comes critics. And like I have to accept what they say sometimes, and I want to go and have a massive argument with them, but that only reflects badly on me. So controlling those emotions, so they get stored and then they have to get expressed. And if they don't get stored, like I said, like you will repress what you express, and then you'll express it in an uncontrolled fashion.
That's an excellent point. And just talking about mistakes, failings, and what have you. To get to where you are now, to have all the businesses, the podcast, the books, the following, everything, there had to be a few mistakes along the way, right? And we always seem to...
There was plenty of mistakes, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It's hard to... we try and avoid mistakes as best as we can, obviously, and failings. Yeah. What's your relationship with failing? What's your relationship with failure or mistakes?
Yeah. So my relationship with failing is I seem to do it quite often, even as ripe as yesterday, this mistake happened. Now, we can say, well, it wasn't Rob, it was one of his team. But I have to take full responsibility for all of my team. So I have to own that mistake. If I don't own that mistake, I can't control the dialogue and fix the problem. So the first thing is, failure is a prerequisite for success. And I think that, there's a little bit of a naive fantasy in in a lot of people, I think, that you can circumvent all the failure, and then there's a fraternity of truth out there which says that failure is a part of success. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really important, Paul, is that you are not your failings. So just because you fail doesn't mean you're a failure. There's a lot of talk at the moment about Lionel Messi, because obviously Argentina could go out of the World Cup and they lost 3-0 to Croatia, and he's never going to be a legend because he hasn't won the World Cup. Well, that's absolute nonsense. Number one, he's one of an 11-man team, and he never had the ball. He can't control that situation. And just because there was one game where Argentina lost, that does not discredit his entire career. So if you own your failures as feedback and as a way to improve, and don't take them on board as who you are. So you are not your failures. You are not a failure. You just fail with actions you do, but you do the best you can with what you know, and no one intends to fail. Then I think if you can build a wall between the identity of who you are and then your failures, I think the next thing is, sure, take your work seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. And sometimes, like I'm a pretty laid back, kind of enjoy life kind of person. I'm reasonably positive, but every now and again I can take myself a bit seriously when I'm trying to do meaningful work, or, when I've got a target to hit. And you've just got to lighten up and enjoy yourself. And I saw this little video. I love watching cricket, and I was watching the England-Australia game. And there's this golfer called, his nickname is Beef, Andrew Johnston. His nickname is Beef. And Ian Botham was playing, and he made this duff. And Beef just rolled around in his buggy and on the floor, laughing his head off. And anyone who's ever met Beef, it's just like, he is the happiest guy you'll ever meet. Now, he's a bloody good golfer. He could be one of the best golfers in the world one day. But it doesn't mean you have to be so serious about your sport that you have no friends and no life. You can still have a smile on your face and enjoy yourself. And I think you take your work seriously, but not yourself. Then when you make mistakes, you just go, oh, well, that's life. That's okay. I'll own it. I'll laugh about it if I can. Doesn't mean I won't take it seriously if it hurt. If it hurts other people inadvertently, then you take that seriously and you own it. So I could talk a lot about failures and failings. I think that where I've grown as a person is I'm okay with failure, and I try not to judge myself for who I am by making mistakes. And by the way, I've learned that my community, my followers, my fans, they're okay with me making mistakes as long as I deal with them well. So if I care to solve the problems, and if I help people, or I make up for the mistakes or make them better or fix them, you actually get a more loyal follower than if you never make them. So I'm often just thinking, okay, I made a mistake. I will own that and apologize for that, and I'll fix it, and I'll make it even better.
This is something I've noticed about when I see you online, and what I see of you online and on the podcast and so on, is that where many people on social media, you see the best version of them, only that. And you don't see what goes on in the background. You don't see the mistakes, the issues. But you seem to have an honesty about you and a vulnerability that you can put out there, which I think is quite endearing for your followers. I think that they appreciate that you're willing to share those mistakes because, we're only human. And, this is where I think it takes me into comparing ourselves to others. Is that do you think that's what it is, where we think we're failing when we're trying to compare ourselves to others, putting people on a pedestal?
Yeah. So social media is an expression of humanity.
Gotta love it.
Gotta love it. Everything that humanity creates is an expression of humanity. And people seem surprised when social media has a downside, and often don't leverage the upside. But all social media is doing is exaggerating and speeding up human expression. So, you mentioned earlier that you only ever see the good side of social media. Well, I think if you look hard enough, you can also see the downside of social media. So we tend to see on social media what we're filtering and looking for. So if we only see people posting filtered selfies of how great they look and how amazing their life is, I feel like that's what we're noticing because of our filtering, perhaps because of some insecurity or insignificance in ourselves. And it's nice of you to say that I express a vulnerable and more honest side on social media. What I'm trying to do is just express truth on social media. And where I'm winning, I've got to try and express that, but without sounding like a dick, because that's important. You need to know where I'm winning if you're following me and you want to win. And then where I'm struggling, it's also important for me to show you that, because that's truth. And I think that if I express truth, what will happen is I'll get the right people that want that truth. People will sense that it's truth and that it's helpful and that it's balanced. It's good when it's good and it's not when it's not. I expressed a couple of things recently about I have about 3 2-week periods in the year, give or take, where I completely lose motivation. I feel lost, frustrated. And by the way, behind it, I'm still very grateful, and I know that these are first world problems. It's not like, oh, my life's over. But, I have these moments where, despite being grateful for my kids and family and life, I just get a bit lost. I lack a bit of focus and drive. I get a bit frustrated with myself. I feel like I should be playing a bigger game. I feel like I'm not really doing deep work. But I think that's my body's way of forcing me to rest, because I'm not really someone that rests. And when I go through those moments, I just share them because that's the truth of what I'm going through. And a lot of people say, hey, Rob, you really? I'm really surprised that you go through those moments. And that's why it's important for me to express that, because I've never said I don't. And I don't want people to get a perception of me that, I'm always on and always motivated and I can always have a good rant and I'm always on this high octane energy, because that's impossible. So be careful how you're allowing social media to influence you. Follow the people that you think express truth that you want to learn from and be inspired by. When you use social media, understand the upsides and downsides that it brings, so it can bring you followers and fans, and it can be a great way to become an influencer and to build a following. And it can also create critics and haters and trolls very quickly. The Han Solo Star Wars came out very recently, which I thought was brilliant, actually. And I thought that they creatively did it right, because they didn't try to be like the other Star Wars, because there's no Jedi in it and you can't be like the other Star Wars. And everyone wants there to be a Jedi Master, it to be like the other Star Wars, but it's not. And, 2 of the stars of that Star Wars got so much hate and vitriol on social media that they shut their social media accounts down. And I just think, what's the world coming to? Why don't people use that energy to do good? If you're a vegan, or if you're a political activist, or if you're a capitalist who wants to help people make money, or if you've got a cure for a disease, put all your energy into doing that meaningful work to help them serve the world, rather than pumping it into hate and vitriol. But that is the nature of social media, because it's just expressing humanity. When things are going well, I'm going to tell you they're going well. I will quite happily post when I buy a Lamborghini Aventador. I will quite happily post when I've had a really shit week, or when my wife nearly died, which happened recently, or when I'm struggling, because that's my truth. And people who love me will love me, and people who hate me will hate me. And people who hate me when I post stuff that they don't like, they'll hate me more, and they'll just look for that. And people that love me, wisdom is not getting over influenced by the people that love you and not getting over influenced by the people that hate you.
Yeah, good point. This is the middle bits, Rob. This is the middle bits of the show where I'm going to throw a few curly questions at you.
Curly questions. I don't know what they are, but I'll have a go.
Okay, question one. What is your number one tip for kick-ass mind health?
My number one tip for kick-ass mind health is to try and be continually dancing on the border of support and challenge.
Oh, elaborate.
So if you don't use your mind, because it's like a muscle, you will experience atrophy in how you feel, how you express yourself, your creativity, your energy. But if you're challenged to the point of breaking, like happened with my dad and can happen, when people have too much challenge in their life, be it, they've been to war or someone they love has passed away or whatever, like significant trauma, which can obviously lead to mental health challenges. So that border, I think, is where you get the maximum growth of mind and health of mind, because not enough to do, your mind will decay. And too much stress on your mind and, it will be too much. So that's balancing, doing meaningful work that challenges you, that's, having a little bit too much to do, but not too much to do, doing meaningful work that is sometimes difficult, but you're not working 15, 16 hours a day. I think that's likely the best thing that will give you long mental faculties and health. And just look at someone like Warren Buffett, who's lived a long life. And he will say he's got good genes, and maybe that's part to play. Who knows? It'll be a lot of factors, but certainly the people that are fully there mentally, a very long age, a long life, generally because they're using their mind like a muscle.
If you could go back and give yourself, say, back to your teenage years before you were 17, and give yourself one piece of fundamental advice, what would that be?
Okay, so the best piece of advice I could give myself when I was 17 is stop drinking and stop chasing women, and stop playing pool all day instead of going to class. But maybe they're not the answers that you want to the question, but that would probably be. Okay, so whilst those answers are true, it's important for me to express my truth. I think the wise advice I would give to myself, and I got asked this similar question by a 22-year-old at a speech recently. So number one is you've got time, so be patient. But number two is you've not got a lifetime, so think and plan and consider what you want to do with your life. Because I think in times in my life I was very impatient because I was young and I had that youthful impatience, which can sometimes be good. But I didn't spend enough time really planning what I wanted to do with my life. And it was part because I was lost, part because I was attracted by, mates and going out and all those things, which sort of made me feel alive at that time. But, at that point in my life, there was a bit of careers advice at school, but no one really pushed me to do it and no one really supported me in that journey. A balance of you've got time, but you've got to think about what you want to do with your life at that age. Because the great thing about the world of social media, Instagram, YouTube, podcasts, everything that we're in now is, the 17-year-old has just got as easily a chance to make a good living and a fortune as a 30 or a 40-year-old.
Yeah. Would you have listened?
Would I have listened? I don't know is the answer. If it had been someone I respected, maybe a friend of my dad's who I'd looked up to and admired, I probably would have listened. But I didn't have any people in my life like that back then, because it just wasn't something I was aware of. I do remember my dad knew a jockey really well called Steve Smith-Eccles, who's a brilliant jockey, and he was successful and he had a really nice car and he was quite wealthy. And I really admired him and loved him. And if my dad had known that, then my dad could have got me more involved with him, and got me sort of, maybe being a bit mentored by him, if you like. But my dad didn't really know much about that, and I didn't know about that. So if you're young, seek out people in your life that you admire, that you respect, that are successful, and try and learn from them and have them guide you. And if you're a parent and you've got kids in their teens, try and find an uncle or a friend of yours who's successful that can act as an unconscious mentor. Because often the people who kids will listen to the least, are the parents. Yeah.
Now, at this point, I usually say, can you recommend a book or resource to our audience? But what I'm going to say is differently is I've lost count on how many books you've put out there, Rob. So I've got a bunch. But if there was one of yours, just one, you can only choose one.
Oh,
which book
that's hard.
Or resource exactly would you recommend?
Okay, so putting on the spot, asking me to pick one of my books when I like to pick all 12 or 13.
Exactly.
Probably Money.
Yep.
So the book Money, Know More, Make More, Give More, because I think especially in UK culture, it's a little bit less so in Australian and American culture, but in UK culture, there seems to be this paradoxical struggle and relationship with money, whereby when we're all honest, we want a nicer car, we want a nicer house, but we don't want to be judged for having the nicer car and house, yet part of us wants to show off about the nicer car and house. And so culturally, in England especially, it's almost been like, well, let's just play a smaller game and repress those emotions because we don't want to be judged by society, when in fact the truth is, even if you want a Tesla, not a Lamborghini Aventador, or a Range Rover, not a Ferrari, that's absolutely fine. I'm not here to judge what you want. So number one is I wanted to help people with the mindset and emotions of money and learn to embrace and accept money for the good when society mostly points out the bad. And then also the school system doesn't really gear us towards embracing and understanding and leveraging capitalism and, being an entrepreneur and a business owner. I'm not a massive critic of the school system like a lot of people are. I think there's a lot of good things in the school system. I mean, look, if you want to be a doctor, a dentist or a lawyer, the school system is the best way to go down. But if you want to build a tech business or start your own enterprise and deal with loneliness and depression and frustration and how long it takes to make money and the dip of all the money that you have to go in debt before you make money, then the school system isn't really geared towards that. And that's what my book Money and my mission in life is, to help people embrace and understand and learn and leverage money more. So Money would be the book above, say, Life Leverage or anything like that.
We'll make sure there's a link to that book. My VA might have a little panic attack if I tell her all 12 or 13 books to put in the show notes, but we'll make sure we get a link to your website so people can get hold of any of your books. Thank you. And you mentioned the school system there. How would you disrupt the school system? What would you do that's different? And I want to ask you about your foundation in a little while, but
sure.
How would you disrupt the school system?
Okay, so I get asked this a lot about the school system, and I have a very clear vision of what it will be and what it won't be. And, I respect other people's choices, but this is mine. So what I've decided strategically not to do is to try to change the school system. Now, one reason is because there's plenty of people doing that. And there's people who've got more reach and have been doing it a lot longer and a lot older than me. So I'll let them do it. I'll do it my way. Number two is, I've chosen in my life to reach out and help the people who want to be helped and who want to change. And I don't think the school system has necessarily a great urge to change. And I think to produce doctors and dentists and lawyers, it does a decent job. And actually, the school that I send my kids to is a decent school. I do things slightly differently, but it's not fundamentally broken like a lot of people think. And if I naively thought I could just go and gob off on my podcast and the books that I write, and all of a sudden the school system is going to bow to me and go, yeah, Rob, we're going to do it just like you do. Well, that's never going to happen. And they know a lot of things about raising kids that I don't, because they've got hundreds of years of experience. So what I am going to do is create a new education system that's more private sector. Because public sector, there's a lot of history, a lot of previous knowledge, and a lot of this is how we've done it, we'll always do it. And the fact that it's mostly tax-paid money rather than private, and it can be a bit of a committee, and things can often take a long time to get done. And the great thing about being an entrepreneur and being in the private sector is you make a decision, you do it. So what I'm going to do is teach young and underprivileged people who want to make more money and set up an enterprise and do more meaningful work and be creative and artists and producers. I'm going to help reach them by giving them scholarships, apprenticeships, and part or fully fund their learning and education. in a more self-employed environment. And that might be in the future building schools like that. It might be creating online resources where people part or fully homeschool on education like that. And I'm kind of doing it already with my Disruptive Entrepreneur podcast and my books and everything else. But, you know, I've kind of always just targeted anyone who wants to listen. And my foundation will target young and underprivileged people primarily, not exclusively, but primarily, because I think that they're the demographics that probably have the least access to resources. You know, if you're 39 and in a good job, you've got more access to resources. If you're 17 and a student, or if you're in a country that doesn't even have an internet connection and in the developing world, you have less resources, and I want to help those people get resources.
I don't want to get into blockchain, but I do see that as being an arm or a lever for that, and a way to be able to leverage that into those underprivileged countries as well. So, yeah, that's great. Okay, final question of the middle bits is, I like to set intention before I set a goal, before I have an interview. I like to set an intention. Yeah. So if you could choose one word to set your intention for the coming 12 months for you, what would that word be?
Disruptive.
Of course it would.
Yeah, disrupt myself, disrupt my industry, disrupt my clients. Positive disruption. Not, disruption for the sake of it, but I'd rather embrace change before the world makes me irrelevant. I'd rather learn something before what I do goes out of date. I'd rather create something before my competitors get to market. That's, to me, what disruptive means.
You made it through the middle bits. Well done.
I'm still alive.
Now, with everything you're doing, how do you cope with sort of the temporary setbacks? And this is going to take me into one of your podcast episodes and live videos. I'll say it so people can jump in and listen to it. It's episode 257. I went back and checked.
Okay.
What to do when everything goes to shit was the episode. But
yeah, it was actually star
T. Yes.
Yeah.
Shit. Now, you described it as a momentary struggle as part of a bigger picture, which I really like that term. And so how do you cope with temporary setbacks, things that, could send you off that emotional cliff?
Yeah.
How do you cope with that?
Okay. So coping with failures, setbacks, even disasters. I think number one is you've got to breathe and you've got to get yourself out of the fire to be able to see the problem for what it is, because we can often make it worse by being impatient, trying to fix it too quick, panicking, etc. So that's sort of step zero is take a breath, try and get some context to the issue. Then step one is creating a plan to start moving away from the problem. Now, that doesn't have to be complete solution to the problem. Like sometimes if you want to get into better health and fitness, the best thing you can do is just go for a walk. If you want to start self-educating, you just put a 10 or 15 minute podcast on. They say, don't they? I know it's quite a common quote, but the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? I think step two, and this can be done in parallel to 0 and 1, is there's someone out there that's had this problem that's solved it. That to them now it's not a problem, or it's a past problem, or it's just an easy solution. So seek out others who've solved that problem. And I think that, like sometimes we can't see the wood for the trees because we've never had the problem and we make it bigger than it is. And so we need others to draw ourselves out of there, mentors, coaches, therapists, whatever it is.
Sorry to jump in. That truly resonates with what I'm doing with this podcast, because that's one thing that I think in particular guys, but both guys and ladies do struggle with, is asking for help. So
asking for help is not a weakness, it's a strength. Yeah. And I think that episode, I talked a lot about, asking for help. It's not a weakness, it's a strength. It's much harder to find the solution sitting there stewing in the pain, praying that someone will come and help you. It's much easier to get to the solution when you go and ask for help. Now, I guess people don't ask for help because they don't want to seem weak, vulnerable, or that they may fail or be judged. But actually, I find when people ask for help, you draw out all the supportive people, and you don't know who they are and where they are. And you actually feel very grateful that there's so many people that want to support you. I know for a fact that if I had some real problems and I reached out to my community, I would draw out all manner of help and support that I didn't even know was there, because I've seen proof of it before. Yeah. So yeah, asking for help and getting people to help you who've already been there and done it. That's really important. The next thing is knowing that virtually all problems and pain is temporary. And in the moment, it feels like it's going to last forever. But, generally human beings tend to go to one extreme, i.e. when things are great, we get complacent because we think they're going to be good forever, or at least we don't plan for when they're not going to be good. And I remember when the recession kicked in, one of my mentors said, Rob, you've got to plan for the next one now. And I was like, wait, that could be 15 years away. And he's like, plan for the next one now so that when it happens, you're ready, you're liquid, you can buy, depressed assets. So, like when it's going good, you've got to plan for when it's bad. And when it's bad, you've got to remember that one day it'll be good, and you've just got to keep going. The next day is, if your heart is beating and you get up in another day, then you should be grateful for all the things that you've got. So when you're going through shit and hell, as Churchill said, just keep going. But when you focus on what you're grateful for, then and what you've got in your life, then that diminishes, the problem. So this last sort of couple of weeks where I felt a lack of motivation from my usual self, where my companies tend to go through sort of slower business in summer, because most people like to come and there's barbecues and World Cups going on, and people don't so much travel for events. Then that frustrates me, because I want every month to be a record month and every month to be growth. When I don't educate myself or grow as much as I'd like to, I feel this sort of frustration. You have a couple of things that happen that don't go your way. But in this same moment, I've got two beautiful kids. I've got my wife. I've got a great life. My parents are still alive. I just bought a Ferrari Testarossa and a Lamborghini Aventador Spider. So how can I'm sitting there thinking, my life, it's rubbish. And sometimes you just got to count your blessings and all the things that you can do. And I realize I'm one of the luckiest people in the world. Now, some people don't have the fortune that I have, but you still have fortune. And even if your fortune is only your health, some people turn their health fortune into millions by personal training or, being an Instagram model or whatever. So everyone has this latent wealth within them, this fortune that can be manifested. It starts with gratitude.
Well, you have that backup if you need to become an Instagram model, Rob. You could just go do that.
Oh, yeah. If all else fails and I go bust, I'm going to be an Instagram model. Yeah, look at me. Of course, yeah.
Excellent. So how come, probably one of my last questions would be, those steps that you talk about, and one of the other ones you mentioned, which I like, is just go out and get it done. Just feel the pain, embrace the pain, and go and just get done what you need to get done. So I find that a really good one. But why are those steps so contrary to what we do? Why are we such self-saboteurs when it comes to we know what we want, but we seem to self-sabotage. Any ideas? So,
the simple answer to why we self-sabotage is human nature, known as fear. And actually, certain self-sabotage is vital for our survival, like not taking risks that get us killed. And so we need fear, and I know this sounds kind of obvious, but people don't get it. We need fear to keep us alive and surviving and thriving and evolving. But of course, fears were more basic and primal, thousands of years ago. They stopped me from dying. They stopped me from starving. They stopped the tribe from sending me out into isolation, which makes me starve and die. Whereas now we fear rejection from individuals. Now, we used to fear rejection from individuals because we get banished from the tribe and therefore starve and die. But we feel the same fear now, but society has evolved as such where it has protection mechanisms where that doesn't happen. So I think what we need to do to stop self-sabotaging is to just contextualize the fear. And sometimes you shouldn't do something because the risk is too big. Should you take all your life savings and put it into some kind of new cryptocurrency? No, that's dumb. But should you start investing or speculating into certain classes which could provide a return? now and risk losing some of your money to gain some of your money? Yes. So contextualize the fear. Will it cause you significant harm to yourself and your family? Probably not. But if it does, don't do it. And if it doesn't, embrace it, roll with it, manage it, master it, defeat it. And of course, it's easy to say, well, when you feel the fear is very strong. So it's just a question of putting it into the box that's relevant. And I find the 3-second rule. I know there's Mel Robbins has the book, the 5-second rule, but I was always taught the 3-second rule, which is I've got 3 seconds to hold my breath and decide whether to do it or not. And it's obvious, really, if it's going to kill me or if it's just something that, like my ego doesn't want to deal with. Hold your breath, go do it. Hold your breath, pick up the phone for the sales call. Hold your breath, press the live button on the Instagram or the Facebook video. Hold your breath, get on the stage, speak in front of people. And yeah, so that sort of 3-second rule has really helped me. So
it's almost like stepping into the fear, step into the uncertainty, because it's quite empowering to come out the other side and go, oh, shit, I managed that. I didn't think I would. Yeah.
Actually, the paradox of fear is your greatest feeling of value, worth, and happiness will come from that line of fear, because the things that are the most challenging to you that you defeat and master give you the most happiness. So, the small wins and the easy things, they give you a slight feeling of happiness, which lasts for a fleeting second. But the thing that you mastered, like your public speaking fear, or, asking someone that you are amazingly attracted to out on a date that you think is way above you and them saying yes, and all the fear, all the courage it took to do that. Or solving a massive problem in your business and creating an app or writing an algorithm which took you years but actually made a difference in the world and made you money. Those things give you the greatest, deepest sense of satisfaction. And I write a lot about managing this in my books, whether it's relating to leverage or money. And Dr. Lieberman has done a lot of scientific research and says the definition of happiness is progress towards a worthy goal. And I think that's a lot of wisdom in a very short sentence. Progress, i.e. you're moving forward, which embraces challenge towards the direction forward. A lot of people think, oh, well, I'll be happy when I've got a laptop and I can live this, completely leveraged. I don't want to do any work and I want passive income lifestyle. But that's not progress. A worthy, i.e. meaningful, challenging, big, and then a goal, something that you set in the future that you haven't yet got already.
So it's more about the journey than the destination.
Well, it's both. It's the journey towards the destination. And I think it's a smart thing to say, Paul, that, it's more about the journey than the destination, but it's actually about both. Because, it's a nice thing to say, isn't it? It's all about the destination, not the journey. But would we carry on the journey if we never got to the destination? No, we wouldn't. So it's actually about the journey towards the destination and reaching the destination and then setting a new journey to a new destination. Because, some people say to me, oh, Rob, the problem with business and making money is it's never enough. You have a goal, that's the thing you always wanted in your life, and then you reach it, and then it's not enough because you want more. You get a Mercedes, then you want then you want a Ferrari, then you want a Lamborghini, then you want a Koenigsegg, and, it's never enough. And you make $1 million, then you want 10, then you want 100. Yeah, that is how it is. And so that balance of I'm enough, i.e. I don't need a Ferrari to make me feel valued. I'm enough where I am, which is the journey, and enjoying the progress and the process as well as the outcome. But you've got to hit some kind of outcome, otherwise what you're doing it for? And then you just reset the new one. And that is life. And to me, that's exciting. And that means when I'm 49, I'll be bigger and better and more and happier and wiser than when I'm 39 and 59 and 69 and 79. We have this naive fantasy that when we achieve a goal, there's a goal that we want to achieve. That's it. There's everything that's enough that's done. And now I can relax and I don't have to have this struggle anymore. Well, if you do that, the struggle will be a lack of worth, lack of progress, lack of meaning, lack of adulation, lack of importance. And so you will naturally go and self-sabotage or create more work. I know better than anybody because I've retired about 5 times. And each time I retired, I went and wrote a book or went and created a podcast or went and bought a massive property, which halfway through, I was like, why have I done this to myself? 150, money was 155,000 words. That's one of the longest books out there. Why did I do that to myself? Because I lost value and meaning and importance and progress when I retired for the 5th time.
It brings us towards the end, Rob, and there's much that I could ask. There's much that I'd love to talk to you about. But I am aware that you want to get out into the gym, preparing yourself for that Instagram career. So we'll let you go in a second. But just to finish off, and by the way, thank you again so much for joining me. It's an absolute honor. I really appreciate the energy, the time. What's coming up for you? What have you got coming up in the next few months to the year? What's going on?
Okay, so next few months, my book Start Now, Get Perfect Later comes out. You can actually get it on pre-order on Amazon, and it will be on Amazon and Audible. And the Audible version has my book Routine Equals Results, which just came out literally a few weeks ago as one of the bonuses.
Got it.
I want to, a lot of people say to me, Rob, what's next? What's new? What's different? And I always want something next and new and different. And that's the paradox that I dance with all the time. And I remember a mentor probably 4 years ago in a board meeting we had. And he said, Rob, why do you have to do something new all the time? Why don't you just consider doing what you did last year and the year before, or what you're good at, but just 10 or 20% more or better? And it was a bit of a showstopper for me, because it was like, never really thought of that, because the assumption always new, more, better, different. So I want to carry on with my Disruptive Entrepreneur podcast. Mark and I will carry on buying property. I want to carry on growing progressive and unlimited success. I'm probably going to write, by the end of this year, I probably would have written 1, maybe 2 new books. I'm writing a book with Gerald Ratner called Reinventing Yourself. So that's mostly what I want to do. Just keep doing what I'm doing, but a little bit more and a little bit better, with a little bit more wisdom, helping a few more people. Obviously, I want to grow my reach, but that's another paradox that I dance with, because I shouldn't Seth Godin said to me, Rob, don't measure yourself on how many followers and fans you've got. Measure yourself on how good your work is. So I'm trying to dance with that and not just be obsessed by getting more followers and fans and reach, because that is a bit of a drug that you can never fully be satiated by. So yeah, that's my answer to that one.
Great stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. And thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I want to ask you one question, Rob. Can you just give us your phrase that you say at the end of each podcast so my listeners can hear it?
Sure. If you don't risk anything, you risk everything.
Beautiful.
All right. Cheers, Paul.